When Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power in 2018, he promised a new era of democratic reforms and an end to years of autocracy. Political prisoners were freed, opposition parties were allowed to operate, and Abiy Ahmed even won a Nobel Prize for securing peace with neighbouring Eritrea. But since then, the future of this complex country has become more uncertain. Earlier this year, we went to find out why.
2 years ago, Ethiopia seemed on the cusp of a remarkable paradigm shift. Widespread anti-government protests, which many once feared could develop into all-out civil war, had instead forced an entrenched authoritarian regime from power. Amid the euphoria, a new young and charismatic Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, came to power. He promised to unify a nation divided on ethnic lines and split by factional battles between powerful individuals. But since his election, it's become clear that's a formidable challenge. In March this year, just as the coronavirus was taking hold, we arrived in Ethiopia to find out why. The 2018 appointment of Abiy Ahmed galvanized Ethiopia. Almost immediately, the new Prime Minister began a reform program to end 27 years of increasingly autocratic rule under the previous EPRDF regime. Abiy released tens of thousands of political prisoners, made peace with neighboring Eritrea after 20 years of an easy armistice, winning a Nobel Peace Prize in the process, and promised free and fair elections in 2020, though these have now been postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. Abey's government holds to the idea of Ethiopia as one indivisible sovereign nation forged over centuries of proud history. But some ethnic leaders and politicians disagree. They say Ethiopia is actually a diverse group of subjugated ethnicities and nationalities, first forged into an easy union 130 years ago by Ethiopia's then ruling royal family. Although since 1995 the country has officially been a federal republic based on 9 ethnic regions, many of the underlying historical tensions between these states remain. To bridge these divisions, Abey created his new non-ethnic Prosperity Party, open to all the ethnic groups. We wanted to ask the Prime Minister about these aims, but our 5 requests for an interview were declined. So instead we turned to his ministers and party officials. Dr. Ayab Tekalin Tulina is a state minister of finance.
This is the kind of reform that reconciles the question of nations and nationalities, the rights of nations and nationalities, but also the question of strong, unified, multi-nation state. And if you talk to an average person in Ethiopia, that's exactly what they want. They want a unified, strong country, but where everybody's rights are respected, where everybody felt they're part of it. So this transformation is unfolding. You have all the opposition groups that have never, stepped their foot in this country for 40 or 50 years at times. They are all in town. So what do you expect? All the activists are in town. All the media that were closed are open. So you would feel some sort of fervor for a while. The idea of let's work together. We're much better off together. One should feel the pain of the other. Would transform this nation. It would create a strong, multinational state. Unified and creates opportunity for all Ethiopians.
Awelu Abdi feels much the same. At the time we spoke to him, he was the public relations chief of Abey's Prosperity Party, and he was equally dismissive of its opponents.
Most of the parties focus on their local agenda, not the national agenda. So while we are focusing our local agenda, including about our clans, ethnic groups, and the like, the big agenda about the national, the Ethiopians, is forgotten. So please better come together, make a unified party, make national party. This was even the problem created by the last regime, EPRDF, because they want to exploit the others. They want to suppress the others. So nowadays, no. We need strong, where the rights of individuals and the groups effectively exercised.
But some opposition voices have been difficult to ignore. A year ago, supporters of Jawar Mohammed, a controversial politician and media owner, gathered outside his home in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. He had just posted a claim on Facebook that his life was under threat from the new national government, a claim the authorities later rejected. An influential figure from the country's Oromo people, the largest single group in Ethiopia's kaleidoscopic ethnic mix, Jawar rejects Prime Minister Abey's national unity agenda and seeks self-rule for his people. Jawar is the figurehead of an Oromo political movement known as the Kero. In April 2018, the movement was at the forefront of protests that forced the resignation of Ethiopia's then Prime Minister and loosened the grip on power held by a rival ethnic group, the Tigrayans, which had long dominated the country's governing coalition. The new Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, is also an Oromo. Jawar and Abey were once happy to be seen together, but their relationship subsequently turned sour as ethnic violence has flared. Many, including the Ethiopian government, say Jawar is to blame.
My opponents have always accused me. The previous government, remember, charged me with treason and terrorism. I never exploded any bomb. In fact, I was vocally against violent means of struggle. I was against armed struggle. Still, I was accused. I was facing the death sentence if I was convicted. I fought for the Oromo people. I never made that a secret. But I am not the one who started fighting for Oromo people. This movement has been 50 years ongoing.
But in another part of this interview, Jawar talked more revealingly about the power of the Kero.
The political forces in this country are really, really scared of the revolutionary force of the Keros. The ruling party has begun crackdown. It has started resorting to the old days of suppressing opposition, suppressing the population.
Last October, protests spread through the Oromia region and led to at least 86 deaths, some at the hands of Jawar's supporters, the Kero. Here in Adama, Oromo protesters clashed with local police and young people from a neighboring ethnic group called the Amhara. But once tempers cooled, these youths in an Adama pool bar began wondering about the motives of those behind the protests.
Saba Amara, Maripa Canasa, Oromo, Panoromo Canasa. By a sunny old jet.
India, on Bion, and I will Sagana, Niapi, and I'm like you named a gaffuni.
Yo, Abey, late Pekka Bezat, bound worked, Casuchala, Mariana Bialasso.
Yet the violence hasn't just been in Oromia. Across the nation, hundreds have been killed in clashes within and between different ethnic groups. It's come as a shock to a nation in which the vast majority has been yearning for quieter times. With some Oromo unhappy about the direction he's taking the country, Abey may have hoped to counterbalance their unease with support from Amhara, Ethiopia's second largest ethnic group. Not only did they help put Abey into power, but they supplied many of Ethiopia's rulers over centuries of imperial rule and might have been expected to sympathize with the Prime Minister's pan-Ethiopian ambitions. But over the last year, they too have been affected by the ethnic tension that in some minds stems from a threat of Oromo hegemony and a breakdown in national security. Incidents in 2019 made things worse. These Amhara parents want to know what's happened to their children. Last December, 20 of them were kidnapped whilst at university in Oromia. There were protests across Amhara demanding the government do more to rescue them.
ስምኝት ነው ያገኘንና አሁን እርማችን እንዋጣ 95 ቀን ያለቀስ ተቀማለሁ ስትል ደክማ ያን ሁሉ አገር ሂዳ ምትታገድ ከሆነ ምትገደል ከሆነ እኛን እስከቱ ምን ሊጠብቀን ነው አንማር.
To this day, no one knows who's holding their children or whether they're still alive. For some Amhara, a people still sometimes maligned for their once dominant role in Ethiopian history, such incidents are a painful reminder that they no longer control their own destiny.
The narrative that depicts the Amhara people as oppressing other nations is a wrong narrative. That is what has resulted in the killings and discrimination of thousands of Amhara people.
Now local politicians are listening to people's concerns about this rising insecurity. Yusuf Ibrahim is the vice chairman of the National Movement of Amhara, a newly formed ethno-nationalist party that's fighting to protect Amhara around the country.
Ethnic politics has already proliferated in Ethiopia. Only the Amhara people would lag behind in that enterprise. Finding the correct establishment in this turbulent situation was necessary for our people, and we came forth to establish NAMA. There are security problems in many locations in the country. There are armed groups, particularly running the Oromia region, even threatening the government to overthrow, and the fear that such situations would disintegrate the nation cannot be ruled out.
At the State Parliament building in the region's capital, Bardar, senior Amhara politicians from across the spectrum came together to listen to Ethiopia's Deputy Prime Minister, Demika Makonnen, who'd arrived from the capital to urge them to work together for peace.
የሌሎች የጥፋት ዓላማ በተግባር ከሚያነግስ አካሄድ አልወጣም። በወሳኝ የትግል ምዕራፍ ውስጥ በስሜት መመራት የሚያስከፍለውን ዋጋ በውል እንገነዘባለን።
Yusuf Ibrahim from Nama was one of those in attendance.
The Amhara groups in the different spectrums are working together. Things are getting improved. This culture should be the baseline for working in the nation.
Today, with political elites struggling to find consensus, both within their own ethnic groups and with others, many worry that young Ethiopians are becoming radicalized. In Amhara, that concern is focused on local vigilante youth groups called the Fano. Like the Kero, they have also been accused of killings. But their members insist they're filling a security void left by a government that no longer patrols their neighborhoods and villages.
አይ መንግስትም ራሱ ሎ ኤንድ ኦርደር የማምጣት ችሎታውን በዚህ ሰዓት እንትን አላለ መገንባት አልቻለም። ብላስ ህዝቡም ደግሞ በመንግስት ላይ ያለው እምነት እየተሸረሸረ ነው ማለት ራሱን ፕሮቴክት የሚያደርግበት መንገድ ይፈልጋል።
አባቶቻችን እቺን ሀገር ሲያስረክቡን ትልቅ ዋጋ ከፍለው ነው። ስለዚህ ተረኞች ነን ብለን እናምናለን። ለሀገራችን አንድነት የሚከፈል ዋጋ ቢኖር ተረኞች ነን ብለን የምናምን ህዝቦች ነን።
ጸረ አማራ የሆነ የፖለቲካ አሰላለፍ አለ። ስለዚህ ያን የፖለቲካ አሰላለፍ እና ጸረ አማራ የሆነ አስተሳሰብ ቻሌንጅ ለማድረግ ነው ይሄን አሶሲዬሽን ወይም ይሄን እንደ ወጣት ማህበር ተደራጅቶ ለመታገል።
These young activists believe in a united Ethiopia and see themselves as both the beneficiaries and defenders of Amhara's imperial traditions. The biggest worry here is the divisive rhetoric, they say, is coming from other parts of the country.
ያንዳንዱ የአማራ ማህበረሰብ ከደሙም ከልቡም የተቀዳ ኢትዮጵያዊነት አለ። አሁን ላይ ሆነ ስታስቡ የትግራይና የኦሮሚያ ተቋማት ሀገራዊ መንግስት የመገንባት ፍላጎት ያላቸው ይመስላል። ሁሉም ህዝብ የተከባብሮ የሚኖርበት ታላቅ ሀገር።
For more than 30 years, the Amhara have been labeled as the fallen rulers of Ethiopia. But now that title belongs to the people of the Tigray region here in northern Ethiopia. Having been ousted from a central role in the country's affairs 2 years ago by the Oromo protest movement and subsequently sidelined by Abey, some here are worried about what the future may hold for their minority ethnic group, numbering only 6 million of Ethiopia's 115 million population.
በአማርኛ ዲሆን ያደንገው ትግሪ ለሁሉም ነገር እድገት ቀላል ሊሆንልን የሚችለው አንድ ላይ መሰባሰባችን ነው።
አይ انا ኦሬዲ ፍልጢናዬ ለየ ማለት ታሕዘላ ዓድሲ ምስትናህና ክብርን መንነትን ትኸል ዓዲ ይኮነት ትነብር ማለት ስለዚህ አንስ ነፃ ልኾነት ዓዲ ባዕላት ማሕደር ኩሉ ነገር ክብርታት ሓልያ ትሕሉ
Although the idea of leaving the Ethiopian state is gaining some traction here, it's not yet a position supported by the recently ousted Tigrayan leadership, the TPLF, which led the National Coalition government deposed in 2018. They were the key architects of the current constitution here, which in 1995 divided the country into 9 ethnically based regions. Tigrayans say this federal system gave marginalized ethnic groups a measure of self-rule after a century of imperial and autocratic rule headed by the Amhara. But Prime Minister Abey's reforms, particularly his move to create a non-ethnic party of national unity, have been met with strong opposition here. Tigrayans we spoke to said they fear that Abey will dismantle the federal system they created.
Any decision that stands in the way of our self-government is absolutely unacceptable. His cheerleaders clearly want the federalism gone. And if he tries to do that, he's going to create a conflict that I personally wouldn't want to imagine.
Getachew Reda is an executive committee member of the TPLF and was the spokesman for the previous government. He believes they've been unfairly scapegoated for the difficulties now facing the nation.
So for us, it was a matter of admitting to having failed as a party, as a coalition, to address the problems that have been bedeviling this country. And the leadership of the Prime Minister is now willing to really come to terms with the fact that the country is sliding towards chaos.
Last month, despite being told not to by the government, the Tigray region ran their own elections. The TPLF won a landslide victory, putting them on a collision course with Abey's government, which could further threaten the stability of the federal system. But Prime Minister Abey has been pushing back against his critics, in particular taking a tougher stance in his own ethnic state. In West and South Oromia, the Ethiopian army has been engaged in a decades-old conflict with Oromo separatist insurgents, a conflict that Abey has, as yet, been unable to resolve. Indeed, his critics accuse him of failing to prevent human rights abuses by state security forces against armed insurgents and civilians. In Barayo, a town on the outskirts of the capital Addis Ababa, we met a number of Oromo men who claimed they'd been beaten by police after a local officer was gunned down in a suspected attack by Oromo separatists.
deemsan ol fadana ko kana rachu gocha sukannesan ratrawatani hatau male immisani imma malekata yo nama barbadan qabatan seera nama bakka seeraatti dhiyeessuun qaama poolisiti namni diduun jiru garuu ofuma saanitiin shorok keessa iranii nama maqaa moggaasanii ofii saaniitti jiru jechuudha ganda kana keessatti
qaa'ina biyyin fudhatee nan baay'ee gammane turre bara wayyaanii takka akka kana taan hin bennu hamma kanammoo Selama kanawno uftaa jennee yeroo gammannu amma kunoo jireenya isa kana ta'e jechuudha.
We asked the Barayo police force to answer these allegations, but no one was available for interview. So we put the questions to the Prosperity Party's Awelu Abdi.
The public and the people around there start asking the question, why you can't keep our peace and security? This was a repeatedly questioned question for the government. And finally, what the government decided and take measure is this issue. It is taken. Now things are already reversed.
It's also the case that the government's attempts at reform have found support amongst key sections of Oromo society. These Oromo elders say they understand why some of their youth are unhappy, but they also see Abey's wider vision for peace and a unified country. Nevertheless, even some of Abey's supporters worry that his efforts to bring law and order to both Oromia and the country at large could have been playing into the hands of his most significant opponent, Jawar Mohammed, whom we met at the start of this film.
If they beat us in a free election, without restricting our movement, without killing, jailing our members, we will accept. We have no problem with that. What we will not accept is a process whereby they rig the election even before the election date by arresting our leaders, by intimidating our members, by shutting down our office, by blocking our gatherings as they are doing right now. We will not accept it.
That particular standoff seemed to come to a head in June this year when the murder of a hugely popular Oromo singer, Hachalu Hundessa, set off more protests in Oromia that led to over 200 deaths. In the mass arrests that followed, Jawar Mohammed and some of his supporters were detained, allegedly in possession of a large cache of weapons. He's now in prison awaiting trial on charges of terrorism, charges he describes as baseless. But not all is always as it seems in these tense times. It's Friday morning in Mekelle, the capital of Tigray. Amid worsening relations between Ethiopia's ethnic groups, even football takes on a political dimension. Today, a team from Amhara is in town, and passions are high. As the match kicks off, a heavy security presence keeps a watchful eye. The match ends with a 0-0 draw, but as the final whistle blows, the away fans make a rush towards the home stands. Everyone here welcomed the reaction of the fans of both sides. In this coming together, they saw a glimmer of hope that Ethiopia can still find a peaceful route towards a better future.
አንድ ላይ ሆነናል ፖለቲካ ሌላ ኳስ ሌላ ነው ኳስ ደግሞ የፍቅር ነው አንድ ያረጋል አንድ አድርጎናል ደስ ብሎኛል መቀሌዎች ወዳጅ
ክንጋነተልና ታይናው ጊዕና ክለብና ክልተ እዩ احنا ግን ሓደ ቤተሰብ ኢና we are family ብዚ መንገድ እሱና ሓጎስና ገሊጽና ኣብዚ ልቆረጽ ላይ ሆነይ ትማሊ ጀሚሩ ወማዓን ተቀጽልንዮ ምሸት ለባህሪና ከነምሽ ዳዕም ክንጫወትና ማለት
for peace and love